There's a single afternoon when the numbers stop being zip codes on a spreadsheet and start sounding like a verdict. You'll be sitting in a kitchen, or in a hospital waiting room, or at your desk when a thought sneaks up on you. This thing I called my retirement fund is thinner than I told myself. That moment, the age you realize your retirement fund is a lie, is not dramatic. It's quiet. It's precise. It's inevitable if you've been treating hope like a plan. Let me be blunt. People prefer comfort to truth. They prefer the story that feels good. I'll figure it out later. Social Security will take care of me. I deserve this. I'll save next year. Over the arithmetic that actually matters. Retirement is unforgiving because it obeys math, not narratives. If you want to know when most people wake up, watch the cohorts. Those median numbers are not statistics for economists to argue over. They're the clock on the mantle. Start here. The median savings numbers for Americans by age cohort are not inspiring. Under 35, roughly $18,000. Age 35-44, about $45,000. Age 45-54, about $115,000. Age 55-64, about $185,000. Age 65-74, about $200,000. Age 75 and up, about $130,000. Numbers without context are wallpaper, so let's translate. Take an illustrative $3,000 a month in spending. That's middle-class living in many parts of the country. Rent or mortgage, utilities, food, basics. What do those savings actually buy? $18,000? That's around 6 months of breathing room at $3,000 a month. Not retirement, not even a stable bridge. It's a used car and a few months' peace if you lose a job. $45,000? That's 15 months, 1 year and 3 months of that same budget. Better than nothing, certainly, but not a retirement plan. It's a cushion, not a foundation. $115,000? That converts to a little over 3 years at $3,000 a month. Now you've got a runway, not luxury, not freedom, a runway. $185,000? That's about 5 years. Closer to something you could call stretching into retirement, but still vulnerable. 5 years of withdrawals means the difference between dying with options and seeing your options slowly amputated. $200,000? That's 5.5 years. Again, illustrative. It's a headline number. It sounds respectable. It looks respectable in a screenshot. It is not the same as a plan. $130,000 for those over 75? That's more than a number. It's the echo of choices made decades earlier. At that stage, withdrawals feel less like spending and more like watching the last of your trees being cut down in slow motion. If these translations feel rough, good. They should. We are translating polite euphemisms, retirement savings, into what they actually mean when retirement arrives. Months and years of living expenses, not months of Instagram posts. The median balances are anchors. They tell you where the median American stands. They do not promise what you want. Now read that first set again and listen for the lie. The lie is not that you have savings. Saving anything is better than saving nothing. The lie is the story you told about those savings, that they were your plan. That story is the one that catches most people unawares in their 50s. The age of realization often lands in the late 50s, when the runway isn't long enough, the job market is less forgiving, health expenses begin to appear, and sequence of returns risk means a bad market crash could cut your remaining years like a saw. Newsflash, time is not always on your side. Time is an advantage early and a penalty later. That's the basic, brutal truth. Compounding works miracles if you show up early. Delay and it does less for you and more against you. Procrastination is not neutral. It's expensive. You pay with lost years. Let's walk the age cohorts properly. I'll give you the numbers, translate them into what they buy, and tell you what those numbers usually hide about behavior. This is not an audit to shame. It's a diagnosis to provoke action. Under 35, median roughly $18,000. If you're under 35, this number is supposed to hurt only a little because you have time. The first lie here is the seduction of, I've got years. You do. But you also face the most pernicious opponent, lifestyle inflation. You start with a modest phone plan, a cheap car, cheap rent, then you get a job that pays better, and you start upgrading everything. New city, nicer apartment, slightly better clothes, weekends that cost more. The salary goes up, and so does the standard of living, and the fraction you save does not. The math of compounding says the earlier you save, the more a dollar today will become decades later. The behavioral fact says you will justify upgraded choices because you earned it. That justification is a thief dressed as reward. If you are lucky, you'll wake up in your late 30s and have at least a decent stock of options. If not, you'll be a good income person with a bad retirement plan. Age 35-44. Median roughly $45,000. Here, the second lie takes root. Now I can afford it. You earn more. The house is nicer. The kids' activities cost more. The car payments get longer. The dollar amount saved increased, but not proportionally to your pay. That $45K looks like progress compared with $18K, but in real household terms, it is barely a sturdier cushion. People in this cohort are the living proof that income is not the same as savings. Behavior is the mediator. If you let lifestyle inflate as your income grows, you'll spend a higher salary and save the same fraction you always did. Your standard of living moves up, your runway does not. Age 45-54. Median roughly $115,000. The middle-aged wake-up call begins here for many. At $115K, you have 3+ years of the $3,000 monthly budget. That's not retirement. It's a buffer. But this is the cohort where math and mortality start to press. You may have health issues in yourself or aging parents. You may be pivoting careers. You may be carrying mortgages, education debt, or a small business. If you are still deferring action, deferral becomes a risk multiplier. This is the time when people start hoping for a burst of investment growth to save them, or some inheritance, or the fantasy of a late career windfall. Hope as a strategy is a sucker's play. If you are 45-54 and rely on hope, you'll be tempted to accept risk you shouldn't take and to sacrifice stability for outsized gambles. Now, if any of this is starting to land, if the numbers made a sound in your head, stop and check your reality. Use the retirement calculator linked below to see where you really stand. Don't spend 5 hours browsing planning blogs. Do a quick reality check and come back. If the numbers look better than you imagined, great. If they don't, you've just saved yourself the luxury of pretending. That's your soft CTA. Now, keep listening. The real work starts when you understand why people get stuck in these traps. Let's be honest about causes. People like to blame external systems. Wages haven't kept up, prices are higher, the job market is brutal. Those are true observations in parts, and they matter. But the central mechanism that turns a paycheck into retirement security is behavioral. Behavior, what you do with the extra dollar. The most common sins are not mysterious. They're boring and predictable. Envy. You see other people with newer cars, nicer vacations, and larger houses, and you feel behind. Comparison feeds consumption. It's not just keeping up with the Joneses. It's small escalations that compound. A subscription here, a home upgrade there, a weekend trip, an expensive dinner, the faster car. Each decision alone is defensible. Add them up year after year, and you've built a new standard of living that eats your future. Procrastination. "I'll start next year" is a sentence that eats decades. Time has an exponential friend called compounding. Begin later, and you lose far more than the years you didn't save. The younger you are when you start, the less you need to sacrifice to get to a decent place. The later you start, the steeper the climb. There's no moral failing in starting late, but there is mathematical cost. Justification. "I deserve this. I worked hard. I need to enjoy life." Those are true statements. So is the truth that enjoyment now and regret later is a poor bargain. You can have both enjoyment and security if you set priorities. You cannot have every upgrade, every impulse purchase, and a top-tier retirement without luck or sacrifice. Debt and stupidity. Credit card debt, long car loans, high-interest consumer obligations. Call it what you want, it's theft by convenience. Debt converts future income into past choices, and often at predatory rates. Avoiding stupid financial moves is not charisma, it's discipline. The most effective financial strategy is ordinary. Save a decent share, avoid high-interest debt, and stop pretending that this one purchase is an investment. Let's talk about two technical ideas that sound fancy but need plain language: compounding and sequence of returns risk. Compounding is simple. Money you earn can earn more money. A dollar invested earlier can become many more dollars later. The trick is the earlier the better. The difference between starting at 25 and starting at 35 is not a decade's worth of savings. It is potentially an order of magnitude difference after decades of returns. The numbers you saw for the under 35 cohort are the reason this matters. 10 years of consistent savings and investment makes the rest of life easier. Delay, and that ease becomes strain. Sequence of returns risk is the thing that punishes bad timing. Imagine you retire and the market immediately plunges 40%. If you're withdrawing money to live on, you're forced to sell low. If the market tumbles early in retirement, the retirement that looked fine on paper can become a train wreck. Conversely, if the market crashes when you're 30, you have decades to recover. This is why the age you realize your fund is a lie matters. A thin runway combined with early market drops in the retirement phase makes recovery much harder. That's the silent assailant people don't plan for because they assume good outcomes will continue. Behavior determines exposure to sequence risk. If you show up to retirement with little saved, any market setback is amplified. If you've spent on lifestyle inflation and have a high withdrawal rate, you're fragile. If you saved consistently and use simple, low-cost investing, you're robust. This is where tough love matters. You don't need financial genius. You need to avoid stupidity. That's not a slogan. It's an inversion principle. Do not try to be brilliant. Avoid the disasters. Consistency beats cleverness. The normal course of action that doesn't kill you financially leads to respectable results. Go out and make a fortune in the stock market if you enjoy double or nothing games, but don't mistake that for a plan. That's the theme that runs under everything I've said so far. Simple arithmetic, steady behavior, early action, and the humility to avoid being brilliant in public markets. Now let me give you a series of plain language diagnoses for the cohorts, not to flog you, but to orient you. Under 35. Your advantage is time. Use it. Automate savings now, even if it's a small percent. Reduce the temptation to inflate your lifestyle as soon as your paycheck grows. Make modest sacrifices early, and you'll buy yourself optionality later. The key is habit formation. 35 to 44. The trap here is that income rises and savings do not. If you haven't adopted automatic increases in saving with pay raises, you're losing ground. The imperative is simple. When your pay increases, treat the increase as a savings event first. If you make that a habit, you'll be shocked how far you can get without feeling deprived. 45 to 54. This is a test of courage and integrity. You can keep living as you have and hope for a miracle, or you can cut the nonsense and accept slower lifestyle growth in exchange for a shot at a secure retirement. This cohort sees the first real friction: care for aging parents, potential career uncertainty, health anomalies. The math is clear. Accelerating savings now is harder, but it beats the alternative of panicked withdrawals later. I want to pause here and make a point about fairness. Not everyone has equal starting points. Systemic disadvantages, job loss, health shocks, and caregiving responsibilities change the game for many people. I'm not pretending otherwise. What I am saying is that within those constraints, behavior matters. If you can save anything consistently, you improve your odds. If you cannot, then focus on reducing liabilities where you can and seek professional advice tailored to your situation. The moral imperative is not blame, it's agency where agency is possible. You've heard the numbers and you've heard the behavioral diagnoses. What's missing is the emotional architecture. People tell themselves stories to stay comfortable. The stories are, "I'll work longer, I'll downsize later, the market will make it up." Those stories are not always false. They are simply risky. Working longer helps, but it also assumes health and opportunity. Downsizing helps, but people underestimate the friction and personal cost of that decision. The market can bail you out, but you do not want to be that person who retires and then needs a miracle. Here's the cruelty of delay. Every year you postpone saving not only loses you compounded growth, it increases the probability that life will throw you a cost you weren't planning for. Healthcare events, repairs, legal trouble, caregiving obligations, these are not statistical rarities over the course of a lifetime. Delay increases the odds you'll need to tap into the same pool you were hoping would grow. Another invisible wire in this trap is social signaling. People spend not because they need to, but because consumption is how status is communicated. The moment you stop letting other people's wardrobes dictate your financial priorities, you reclaim a surprising amount of mental freedom. Discipline is liberation, not austerity. If you want dignity in your 70s, start treating small choices now as investments in future dignity. At this point, you may be thinking, okay, but what do I actually do? I'm not giving a long menu of products or a list of opaque strategies. I'm giving you the moral order of action. Start now, automate, keep fees low, avoid lifestyle creep, and be realistic about Social Security as a backup rather than a plan. But before we move fully into the action list, we need to complete the cohort picture because the second half of the timeline, ages 55 and beyond, is where decisions made earlier reveal their consequences. People often don't experience the truth until then. In your 50s and 60s, you experience the arithmetic of past choices in a way that is unmistakable. The runway shows its true length. The market's temperament reveals your vulnerability. Healthcare expenses and longevity calculations start to matter. If you are into delayed gratification, this is the moment that shows whether you invested in options or borrowed against them. I'm going to stop here, not because there isn't more to say, there is, but because the next stretch is where the script tightens. We're about to move into the final diagnostic beats. The 55-64 cohort, the 65-74 reality check, and the 75-plus aftermath. That is where the age you realize often comes into full focus. It's also where the practical, prioritized playbook must be urgent and precise. The stakes are higher. The remedies are narrower. Choices that are optional in your 30s are near mandatory in your 50s. When we continue, we'll translate the $185,000 median for 55-64 into a lived reality and explain how sequence of returns risk and withdrawals create a dangerous squeeze for the underprepared. We'll also walk through exact behavioral corrections that are small, concrete, and repeatable, things you can do immediately to change trajectory. For now, carry this with you. Ordinary consistency, early action, and a dedication to avoiding stupidity are the three levers that do the real work. The rest is noise. We pick up where the numbers begin to translate into consequences you can actually feel. The 55-64 slice of the population is the moment when the abstract becomes concrete. By then, the runway is revealed. The safety net feels thinned. The excuses sound thinner too. If you're in that 55-64 cohort, the median balance is about $185,000. Translate that into breathing terms. At $3,000 a month, that's roughly 5 years of spending. 5 years. That's not a lifetime. It's a pause, a gap. It can buy you the luxury of choice if you're near the finish line with housing paid off and health good. For most people, it's an alarm bell. Why is this cohort so urgent? First, you're less employable the older you get. Employers prefer cheaper, younger hires for most positions. That's reality. Second, health issues begin to appear with higher probability. Third, the time buffer that makes recoveries possible is shorter. If the market drops during these years, the margin for recovery narrows fast. Withdrawals during a market downturn are the silent tax that eats your principal. Sequence of returns risk is not an academic phrase at this stage. It's the sound of your balance shrinking because you had to sell into a downturn to pay bills. What do people in this group do wrong? Mostly, they compound previous behaviors, lifestyle inflation that wasn't unwound, hoping for late miracles, and finally, panic. Panic is costly. Panic leads to selling low, taking loans against home equity at the wrong time, or chasing yield in unsafe places because the math looks desperate. None of those cures solve the problem. They accelerate it. So what should someone in 55 to 64 do practically? First move, stop adding to the damage. That means freeze the unnecessary spending. It's not glamorous advice, it's effective. Secondly, triage your balance sheet. Prioritize paying off high-interest debt, not because it's exciting, but because it's a guaranteed internal rate of return. An 18% credit card charge is the enemy. Knocking it out is the best investment you can make for your future. Third, consider extending the runway by reducing current spending in concrete ways. Downsize housing if it reduces cost and increases security. Eliminate car payments. Negotiate medical bills. Sell stuff you don't need. These are not heroic acts. They're sober ones. At the same time, increase savings to the degree you can. When you're starting from a smaller base at this age, each additional dollar saved matters more than at 25. A dollar saved at 55 does not become what a dollar saved at 35 becomes, but it still buys a portion of option value, less dependence on withdrawals, less vulnerability to market timing. Automate this increase so it becomes default. Set up payroll contributions, forced transfers, anything that makes saying, "I'll do it later," impossible. And if you're still in the workforce, consider risk-managed strategies for your investments. Don't overcomplicate. Avoid exotic bets. Make sure you're not sitting in high-fee actively managed funds, loaded annuity products with opaque fees, or investments that promise steady income without disclosing the trade-offs. Keep most of your portfolio in simple, low-cost exposures you understand. If market timing is your plan will fail when the market is least cooperative. If you own a business, get honest about succession and sale prospects. Many small business owners imagine a lucrative exit. Often, the market for a small business is neither as liquid nor as profitable as owners hope. Professional advice matters here. A clear-eyed sale prospect or succession plan is worth more than a fantasy. Now, the 65 to 74 group. Median balance about $200,000. In the abstract, that looks like an improvement,
But let's translate. At $3,000 a month, that's approximately 5.5 years. Again, this number reads like prudence on paper, but often collapses under real-world pressure. Healthcare costs increase, medication prices bite, home maintenance suddenly becomes expensive, and long-term care risk looms. Many people in this cohort have mortgages or are carrying lingering debt.
The temptation to treat Social Security as the rounding out tool is strong, but Social Security alone rarely replaces pre-retirement income. Consider it a foundation, not a mansion. The real danger here is withdrawals that begin to look necessary. People in this stage sometimes rationalize spending by saying, "I've earned this," or "I'll be frugal next year." And then the next year brings new expenses. The combination of withdrawals and market volatility is lethal. If you start taking 5% or more out of a portfolio of modest size and the market suffers, compounding works in reverse. Your portfolio becomes smaller and the percentage you need to withdraw increases, a vicious cycle. There are sensible mitigation tactics in these years. One is to secure a small portion of guaranteed income. Pensions, part-time steady work, protective annuities if they're appropriate after careful vetting, or a laddered bond strategy that matches near-term spending. I'm not endorsing any single product. I'm saying think in terms of matching assets to liabilities. Keep a cash buffer allocated for the first few years of expected spending. That reduces the chance you must sell assets at a market low to meet living costs. This is the practical side of sequence of returns mitigation. Don't force sales during down markets. Also, be surgical about spending. Not all reductions are created equal. Preserve quality of life expenditures that directly sustain your well-being. Cut the headline luxuries that satisfy status but do little for health or relationship quality. One of the most effective switches people make is trading lavish, conspicuous purchases for quiet investments in health, better sleep, preventive care, minor home improvements that prevent larger costs later. Those diminish the chance of a surprise that forces withdrawals. Now the 75-plus bracket. Median balance about $130,000. Don't gloss over that figure as merely less. It's the slow-motion consequence of decades of small choices. Converted again at $3,000 a month, that's roughly 3.5 years of basic spending. For many, that number has to be stretched by Social Security, by housing that's paid off, by family help, or by downsizing. For some, that algebra works. For others, it does not. This is the stage where withdrawals often feel like amputations. People watch principal shrink as income is spent away. The psychological weight is heavy. Choices made in the 20s and 30s get revealed now. That's not fatalistic talk, it's arithmetic. If you're in this age group and reading this, two things matter more than anything: manage risk and manage dignity. If you have limited resources, preserve dignity by avoiding humiliation. Get counsel about benefit optimization, legal protections, and how to structure income for steady cash flow. This is not the moment to chase obscure schemes that promise dramatic relief. It is the moment to be clear-eyed and practical about what remains possible. Across all cohorts, we've been circling the same point. Behavior matters more than headlines. That's where the inversion principle becomes useful. Charlie Munger loved inversion. Think backward. Instead of asking, "What must I do to become fabulously rich?" ask, "What will ruin me financially?" Then you can avoid those things. Avoiding ruin is much easier than inventing miraculous growth. Avoiding predatory debt, avoiding high-fee investments, avoiding habit-driven consumption, avoiding procrastination, those are the real levers. Let me make the inversion concrete. Imagine two people with identical salaries at 30. Person A avoids credit card debt, saves consistently, increases savings when income rises, and uses low-cost funds. Person B buys into status moves, carries high-interest debt,
and treats investing like a casino. At 65, person A will not be fabulously rich necessarily, but she will almost certainly be less vulnerable. Person B will either need to rely on luck or will face hard compromises. The difference is simple. One avoided disasters, the other did not. Invert. Avoid the disasters, and the success follows. We've spoken about math and behavior enough. Now let me turn to the playbook, the short, prioritized, repeatable actions that function in the real world. This is not a long menu. It's a ranked set of moves that give you the highest expected return per unit of effort. First, know the number. Use a retirement calculator. Be brutal with the inputs. Assume conservative returns. Assume modest longevity. Run scenarios. What happens if you retire at different ages? If you cut spending by X%? If market returns take a hit early in retirement? Understanding the landscape clears illusions. If you prefer not to trust a generic online calculator alone, see a fiduciary planner for a one-time assessment. Don't shop for reassurance, shop for truth. Second, automate saving. The most reliable players in finance don't rely on willpower. They create defaults. Set contributions to your retirement account so they occur the day you are paid. If you can, increase the contribution automatically when you get a raise. Make the first move invisible to your impulse to spend. Third, prioritize paying off bad debt. High-interest consumer debt is the fastest way to lose future freedom. Treat it as a tax on your future options. Pay it off with a plan. If you're drowning in complex obligations, speak to a certified credit counselor. There are reputable options that cost less than financial distress. Fourth, max out the most tax-advantaged vehicles available to you within reason. I'm not prescribing a specific product, but using Roth or employer-sponsored accounts sensibly matters because tax treatment compounds over decades. If you have access to an employer match in a workplace plan, take it. That match is effectively instantaneous return. This is basic arithmetic, not wizardry. Fifth, keep fees low and be boring. Prefer broad market exposures with low expense ratios. Avoid being seduced by the promise of outperformance sold by active managers who charge excessive fees. Over decades, fees compound against you. The psychology that says, "I need a star manager," costs you. Ordinary indexing plus discipline beats expensive bravado most of the time. Sixth, maintain an emergency fund. This reduces the chance you must liquidate investments at the wrong time. Even for younger cohorts, 3 to 6 months of living expenses in liquid form prevents many cascades. For older cohorts, a larger buffer, perhaps covering 3 to 5 years of expected spending, can be the difference between riding out a downturn and panicking. Seventh, attack lifestyle inflation deliberately. Make a policy. When income rises, allocate a fixed portion to fun and a fixed portion to savings. For example, for every $1,000 of new income, treat $600 as a forced saving and $400 as lifestyle. The exact split is yours. The point is to institutionalize the increase so lifestyle doesn't creep up unchecked. Eighth, protect health and insurability where possible. Stay engaged with preventive care. Health shocks are expensive and unpredictable. Investing in your own health is not vanity, it's a risk management strategy. Good health supports the capacity to work longer if needed and reduces unplanned medical drains. Ninth, reassess big assets. Houses, cars, boats, they all have a total cost of ownership. Ask whether the asset fits your retirement timeline. A large house can be a drag if holding it prevents you from securing cash flow later. Downsizing, renting, or moving to a lower-cost area are options that change the arithmetic in favor of long-term security. 10th, consider phased retirement and income diversification. If possible, shift to lower-intensity work that still pays. Part-time work, consulting, freelancing, these aren't failures. They are tools to manage the sequence of returns risk and extend the runway while you still have health and energy. The social narrative that retirement must be abrupt is false for most people. These 10 moves are not glamorous. They are humble and relentless. They are the opposite of viral videos. They're what you do while nobody applauds. Behavioral change is the hardest part. You have to reorder your identity a little. You must learn to find status in reserve rather than in display. Here are psychological nudges that help. Automate everything you can. Make saving feel like a non-choice. Change your default social interactions so your cues to spend are reduced. Set visible but private goals like I will save X by Y date and track them weekly. Build satisficing rituals. A modest weekly review where you check balances and anniversaries of goals. Rituals convert abstraction into habit. Now, let's talk about risk management specifics in plain language.
Sequence of returns. You can't control when markets drop, but you can control how much of your near-term spending is dependent on market sales. If you plan to retire soon, construct a reserve of cash or short-term bonds to cover the first 3 to 5 years of your expected withdrawals. That way, if the market dips in year 1 or 2, you're not forced to sell into a downturn. Reassess the percent allocated to equities versus safer assets as you approach retirement, but do so without overcompensating to the point where returns can't keep up with inflation. That's artful, but not mysterious. Tilt toward protection as your dependence on the portfolio increases. Another risk is concentrated exposure, owning too much of one stock, especially your employer's stock. Be blunt. Owning much of your employer's equity is a double bet on the same outcome. Your job and your portfolio both suffer if the company falters. Diversify away from that single-point risk where you can. Let's also touch on Social Security and government benefits. Treat them as partial, not total solutions. Understand your expected benefit level so you can model withdrawal needs. Delaying benefits might increase your monthly check, but it also assumes health and the ability to work longer. For some, delaying is a smart lever. For others, collecting earlier is necessary. This is a personal optimization problem, not a one-size-fits-all prescription. Consult professional advice if the decision is material to your finances. A caution about financial products. If a product sounds designed to keep you from leaving it, surrender charges, complex fee structures, confusing payout mechanics, step back. The financial industry has brilliant marketers. The consumer must be their own skeptic. Fees are multiplication factors on the error of overconfidence. If you buy something because a friendly salesperson made it feel emotionally secure, not because the math checks out, then you've just transferred risk from uncertainty to ongoing cost. Now, some of you will argue, but I had emergencies, I had caregiving responsibilities, I had layoffs. All true. Life happens. My thesis is not to blame individuals for structural shocks. It is to highlight that, when agency is possible, the choices you make matter. Even small, consistent behaviors, saving a modest percent, avoiding high-interest debt, automating contributions, compound into resilience over time. If your life disrupts you, the resilient, financially prepared are those who have buffers, low debt, and diversified income. There is another human truth I want to address. Regret is expensive, but action is available. Too many people get stuck in the paralysis of shame. They look at their balance and decide forecasting forward is hopeless. That's not true. The math is less forgiving with delay, but it's not deterministic. People change their trajectories in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. They sell unproductive assets, they downsize, they add income streams, they prioritize health and slow consumption. It's hard, it's not glamorous, but it works more often than not. And here's the stern moral. The kindness you do to your future self is the highest return generosity imaginable. Think of the older you, your future self, as someone you must protect. That person will thank you in decades that once present will seem to arrive overnight. The age you realize your retirement fund was a lie is avoidable if you treat your future self as a client, not an abstraction. Now we arrive at the climax, the inversion stated plainly. Avoid stupidity. It sounds cruelly simple, but it's true. Don't take desperate bets. Don't accumulate high-interest obligations. Don't let lifestyle inflation be the measure of your success. Avoid those three things, and you will, in most cases, be far better off than people who chase cleverness. This is not an argument for mediocrity. It is an argument for epistemic humility. Markets are vast, noisy, and indifferent. Your individual life is finite and precious. Make choices that respect that finiteness. If you want a final checklist that you can act on in the next 30 days, here it is in human terms. Run a sober retirement calculation, set up or increase automatic contributions, identify and attack any credit card or high-interest debt, create a 3 to 5 month emergency fund, or larger if you're close to retirement, review investment fees and simplify where possible, and make one concrete lifestyle change that frees up cash each month. No drama, no theater, no shame, just a single measure that moves the needle. If you do nothing else, automate something. Automation beats intention every time. We started with the image of a quiet kitchen or a waiting room where a realization arrives and speaks in a whisper. Your retirement fund is thinner than you thought. That moment is the hinge of everything. It doesn't have to be a verdict. It can be an invitation to action. The age you realize your retirement fund is a lie is not necessarily when the lie proves fatal. It can be the age you finally start treating your finances with the same seriousness you treat your health or your family. You have agency left. You may not have all the decades you once thought you did, but you have enough to change trajectory. The secret is stubborn, unglamorous fidelity to small, effective moves. The world does not reward dramatic displays nearly as much as it rewards quiet consistency. So here's my last blunt command. Stop pretending hope is a plan. Hope is nice. It is not a replacement for arithmetic. Start today. Automate one retirement contribution, cancel a payment you don't need, pay off one high-interest bill, run the retirement calculator in the description, and be honest with what you see. If what you have now is insufficient, act on the steps above. If it's sufficient, steady your habits and keep building. Avoid the disasters. Avoid the stupid, expensive choices. Make boring discipline your identity. The payoff is not a headline. It's dignity later, options when you need them, fewer humiliations, and the freedom to live your later years with competence rather than panic. If this woke you up, do one thing right after this video. Automate a single retirement contribution for next month. Then check the resource linked below, the retirement calculator, and know where you stand. That small motion is the simplest, highest leverage act between you and a future that is not ruled by regret. There's one last image to leave you with. Picture that quiet moment again, the kitchen, the waiting room, the desk. Picture your future self in it, not as a stranger, but as someone you can choose to protect. The age you realize your retirement fund is a lie doesn't have to be your sentence. It can be your wake-up call. Heed it. Act. Avoid the disasters. The rest follows.